Hello everyone! Kumusta? This is Che and welcome to my channel. Mabuhay from Philippines. Today I will be sharing with you how my mother grows her orchids, or particularly where she plants them. I told you in my previous video that my mother only planted orchids on trees before, but of course over the years she also learned to plant orchids on hanging net baskets and others. Today I will be sharing with you two fast-growing, easy-to-grow trees to mount your orchids and other plants you already have at home which you can also mount your orchids. This is my mother's garden. From here up to there, and even outside the house at the side of the road. And as you can see, she is not particular of the arrangement. What's important to her is that the plants and orchids grow well or grow, and that she has something that she likes. She just plant them anywhere. And even though this is the arrangement, I think my garden is only a quarter of her garden. So there are things that we can learn: how she grows her orchids, how she grows her plants. So let's go. I will share them with you. The first one is Madrid Cacao. I don't know how it is called in different countries, but this is the leaves and this is the body or the stem or the trunk, but it is already dead. This one. This Madrid Cacao is very easy to grow. You can just cut some branch or matured stem and then you insert it or you plant it into the soil and then it will grow for you. This is still a Madrid Cacao. My mother just planted a stem and it is already growing. So this is a very common or popular tree to grow an orchid here in the Philippines. She attached a VANDA here, and she also attached other orchids, then a dendrobium orchid here. This was a large Madrid Cacao trunk and it is already damaged, but it is still hard and it can last for years maybe. And then when it is already rotten, the orchids will be growing in this Madrid Cacao. So my mother just attached orchids. Her orchids are mostly mocaras, vandas, and dendrobiums, also cattleyas, but mostly here are vandas. There is no shading net here, but there's a shade from the trees, from our lanzones. So here, more Madrid Cacaos, and this was an old Madrid Cacao. Planted some cattleyas, dendrobiums, and vandas. And this one is a tiny orchid, very cute. Here are some vandas and the dendrobium. Look at the spike. It's a very long spike. Old Madrid Cacao trunk is already dead, so she just attached or tied it to a new Madrid Cacao, newly planted stem that is already growing, Madre Cacao is very easy to grow. It can even grow on charcoal. I use some stem or branch as a stake for my vandas, and they are growing on charcoal. But the problem with Madrid Cacao is that it is very attractive to pests or insects. And whenever the Madrid Cacao has some pests or insects, they will also go to your orchids. So that is something to look for. That is something to be cautious for Madrid Cacao. The other tree, which is fast growing, easy to plant and grow, which my mother used for orchids, is a Malunggay tree or Moringa tree. It is also called a miracle tree. It's very popular here in the Philippines. Sometimes it is also called a vegetable because we use this in our food, in our soup. It is very rich in vitamin A, and it can help mothers, nursing mothers, to produce more milk. So I will show you orchids, of course. So these are the orchids that are attached or mounted on a Malunggay tree. It is already big. It is already very tall. So this is an oncidium, and it is growing very well in a Malunggay tree. This is also an oncidium, and there are some new dendrobium cakeis which my mother attached. There's also a dove orchid there. So the orchids are free growing, free flowering. They get watered from the rain. Since it is already near a faucet, my mother also waters these orchids. This is also a Malunggay tree or Moringa tree, and there are also some orchids here. And Malunggay or Moringa is also very easy to grow. You can grow it from seeds or from stems or branch. Just cut some stem or branch and then plant it in the soil, and it will grow for you. This is an old Moringa tree, that's why it is already very big. Now I will show you some trees or other ornamental plants which you can plant or mount your orchids. This is a gumamela or a hibiscus, and this is already a large one because it is grown for how many years, and my mother attached orchids here. She attached some dendrobiums, oncidiums, even phalaenopsis and dove orchids. She even had a strawberry there. These are fortune plants, and my mother planted or attached orchids to the stem or to the body of these plants. So I think that if you have some plants there which has big body or big stems, you can attach orchids to it, just like how my mother grows her orchids. So maybe that's something to try. And as you can see, there are different orchids here. I am not sure what's the name of that. I think it's an arachis. There are mocaras and dendrobiums. Also, my mother attached orchids to the fence, to the wall, to the hollow blocks. So as long as the orchids can tolerate the environment, they will grow. So they are watered. They also get rain and they get direct sun. Also, out of the Moringa tree, of the Malunggay tree, you can have your natural fertilizer, and that's what my mother used for her orchids and for her plants. She gets all the leaves, she puts them to a blender, and then keeps them in a storage for how many days, and then after that she sprayed them to her plants, to her orchids. So if you have this tree, you already have something to attach for your orchids and a natural fertilizer. My mother's orchids and my mother's plants are in a very uncontrolled environment. They get rained when it rains, they are exposed to sun and heat or anything nature has to offer. So if the orchids can tolerate that, if the plants can tolerate that, they will grow well in this kind of environment. Also, these plants and these orchids are exposed or prone to insects and snails. There are snails, big snails here, but they are still growing. So my mother is happy with that. This is how she likes to grow her orchids and plants. And the plants are rewarding her with flowers, beautiful blooms, and colorful leaves. This is the Phalaenopsis that I showed you on my previous video. This is my mother's orchid. This is a species or a native orchid, and she is grown in a durian tree. I will show you a durian fruit. That is a durian fruit if you haven't seen this kind of fruit yet. So it is very spiky, so when it is already ripe it will just fall on the ground, and it is very yummy, very delicious, very sweet. So you can plant or mount your orchid on any fruit trees or trees, even palm trees. We have a palm tree there in my garden, but I cut the leaves because of the net. So any orchid will grow well on a fruit tree or any tree. This is a Dracena, and we call this here fortune plant, and over the years it had grown this big and it became perfect for this orchid. So this orchid here is grown in this plant, in this fortune plant. It is beside the road, and it is also near our solar dryer. So this is our solar dryer. That's my garden there, and here we dry agricultural products like corn, copra, and others. My mother planted these plants here, and we also have gumamelas outside. And this orchid, this dendrobium, is never fertilized. This orchid is never watered, so it is only watered when it rains. And it is shaded by the leaves of this plant and also from our lanzones. But it still gets direct sun when it is afternoon. And as you can see, the plant is thriving. She is growing well in this plant, in our fortune plant. This is another dendrobium. It is planted on a Madrid Cacao trunk, but the trunk is already damaged, so the orchid or the dendrobium is already leaning or falling over. So what my mother did, she cut a branch of Madrid Cacao and planted there. So by the time that this Madrid Cacao is bigger, the new growths of this dendrobium will be growing on the new Madrid Cacao. So this is outside our house, very near the road, and that is where the other dendrobium is, on a fortune plant. This is a croton, I think. It is an ornamental plant with colorful leaves, and over the years it had grown bigger, and my mother planted sangumay or dendrobium anosmum here, and also other dendrobiums. It is also near the road. It is no longer a property, but since it is not used, my mother planted anything she wants here, including orchids. This is another ornamental plant. I think it is called a Mickey Mouse plant. I will just post a picture of the flowers of this plant. And over the years also, it had grown bigger, and my mother planted cattleyas there. And I think the cattleyas love the place, love the plant, the ornamental plant, and it had grown a lot. It is free flowering, free everything, only gets watered from the rain, no fertilizer, and it is growing well. I think there will be flowers soon, and I will post a picture or a video when it blooms. That's all for today. Thank you for being with me. Thank you for watching. Maraming salamat. Paalam! See you on my next videos.